Hi everyone, thank you for joining. Today we have a very cool Tissot from the 1940s, 1945 to be specific, and it needs a lot of help. I got this from a second-hand shop. I think I paid around $70 for it. Well, the straps are somehow ripped off. I've never seen that before. The watch doesn't run, and the person I bought it from didn't know why, as it's usually the case. And the crystal, you can see, it's very broken. Looks like a car ran over it. But anyway, that should be an easy fix. We can just replace it for a new one. I'm also not sure if the watch has been serviced before. It definitely does not look like it, but if it is, we will see some marks engraved on the inside of the case back. Well, first things first, let's open the back and see how it looks inside. Oh, wow, good news. This looks already way better than expected. Let's have a look at the case back first. We can see some watchmaker marks inside the case back. I'm not sure what those mean, but at least we know it has been serviced before. Okay, so now we can use the pegwood to clean that up a little bit. The more we clean now, the easier it will be for the watch cleaning machine. Wait a minute. This is not dirt, I think. Let me... Well, this is definitely not dirt. This looks like a very old rubber gasket, but I don't know, it looks like metal to me now, so I'm not sure how this used to look. Just look at all the dirt coming off this. Well, one more thing to replace. I mentioned this before, this wooden stick is made out of soft wood, and it's usually used to remove debris or stubborn dirt. It's used specifically in watchmaking because if you would use tweezers or any other metal tool, you would scratch the parts you're trying to clean. Okay, let's clean a bit the bench first and then have a look at this. The movement looks great, to be honest. This looks like it's new compared to the outside. I don't want to speak too soon yet, so let's disassemble it and see if we have any surprise waiting for us inside. To take the movement out of the case, the first thing we have to do is to take the stem out. We unscrew here a bit and we should be able to pull this out. There you go. Very dirty as well. Let's have a look under the microscope. All of this will be clean later, but let's try to remove it a bit first. There's actually a rubber gasket, the one from the crown, also disintegrated inside this pendant tube. Ugh, no wonder the watch doesn't work. No, okay. Well, a bit better. This is the moment I've been waiting for. The dial is basically the only thing you get to see when you're wearing the watch, so it's all worth it if it's in good conditions. Look at this. This looks amazing. Look at the patina on this dial. It has an orange color to it. Very, very nice. Way better than expected. You can see it's written Antimagnetic just below the logo, which seems like a weird thing to write on a watch dial, but this was quite a technical achievement at the time. The reason why this is important is because from the 1930s, people were buying more and more appliances for the household that use electricity to work. These were telephones or radios. I think the microwave came later, but it's the same thing. All these devices produce electromagnetic fields and are able to magnetize watches. That means that they interfere with the balance spring and make the watch run too fast or too slow, so gain time or lose time, which definitely defeats the purpose of wearing the watch in the first place. The reason it's written here below the Tissot logo is because Tissot came up with some improvements to compensate for these magnetic fields and was the first manufacturer to introduce non-magnetic wristwatches, and they actually marketed these anti-magnetic models quite heavily. I assume the general population at the time was not aware that this was a problem, and they were trying to make it very obvious by showing, for example, huge magnets next to watches, or a guy holding a phone where it's written, "Even phones can magnetize your watch." So one of the improvements was the material that the case is made of, and this movement ring that we will try to remove now. Maybe a bigger screwdriver. Perfect. So as I was saying, this ring around the movement is made out of more conductive materials that prevent magnetic fields to reach the hairspring inside the watch. Tissot was even claiming that 40% of the watch repairs were not needed anymore with what they call the non-magnetic watch. The small letter reads, 2 out of every 5 watches taken to a watchmaker for repair have nothing wrong with them, except that they're magnetized. Let's have a look at these under the microscope. You can see the thick layer of radium loom. It doesn't match perfectly with the numbered lines, and this is because it was painted manually back then. Radium is radioactive. It was banned in the late 60s when they realized. Before that, they used to put radium everywhere, even in food, so we have to take some extra precautions when working on these watches. Nowadays, all watches are anti-magnetic. After Tissot in the mid-50s, IWC introduced the Engineer, Rolex made the Milgauss, Omega made the Railmaster, and all the other brands joined. The next step is to take the cannon pinion out. For this, I have a vintage tool made especially for this. It works like one of these claw machines at the arcade, so when you press the lever down, the claws close, and then pull the cannon pinion out. The problem is that it's hollow inside, and if you take it out with the tweezers and press too much, you can damage it. Okay, time to start disassembling from the movement side. Now we have to take the balance spring off. This is one of the most delicate parts of the watch. It has a very, very thin spring. It's called a hairspring, so imagine how thin it is. Whoop. This was a second improvement that Tissot implemented to make watches resistant to magnetic fields. And they did this by replacing these hairsprings by ones that are made out of special metal alloys that are not sensitive to magnetic fields. The big wheel I'm unscrewing is called the ratchet wheel. And this one is a crown wheel. You can see the teeth underneath that make it spin. This part as well. Okay. This tiny part here is called the click, and this is what actually makes a satisfying clicking noise when you're winding the watch. It has a very tiny spring underneath, and this is what actually helps bringing the piece back in place and preventing the mainspring to unwind itself. Can fly away very easily. Now the next thing to remove in this part of the movement is called the train wheels bridge, and this is what keeps the train of wheels in place. These bridges have some small grooves underneath, so you can fit a small screwdriver and carefully lift them. But we have to be very careful not to scratch the main plate. And okay, not too bad. You can see all the wheels resting here very delicately inside the jewel holes. I shook the movement a bit accidentally and messed them all up already. This set of wheels are called the train of wheels, and what they do is transfer the power from the mainspring all the way down to the balance. Let's take off the pallet fork bridge. Again, we have to fit the screwdriver underneath. This time even more carefully. We don't want to hit the pallet fork. Perfect. And then the pallet fork off. The last part of this side of the watch is called the power source. So let's take first the barrel bridge off. You can see a small number engraved in there. This is the serial number for this particular movement, and you can check the year it was made. All the manufacturers keep records of this, most of them you can find online, so that's pretty useful if you want to date your watch. But with some others you will have to contact them and they will charge you a bit to look into their archives and give you the information. The part I'm removing now is called the barrel, and it's what holds the mainspring inside. So now we have to take a stacking block, open the lid and take the mainspring out. We have to be a bit careful here. This is a long spring and it's coiled up very strongly, so we don't want it flying to the other side of the room. There you go. Oops. Okay, now we found the mainspring, but you can see it's all coiled up inside the barrel. If we want to clean it properly, we have to take it out first. To remove the arbor, we use a thick pair of tweezers and we try to wiggle it slowly until it comes out. If we can. This has a tiny pin on one of the sides that engages with a hole in the inner coil of the mainspring when you wind the watch. So then we take the tweezers and we take out the beginning of the mainspring. We alternate then the thumbs up and down so it comes out slowly. It's important that we take note of the direction that the mainspring was coiled on, so we make sure we place it back correctly. And this is it. You can see the mainspring uncoiled. This is one of the newer ones with an S shape, where the end of it turns the other direction. And what this does is make sure that the watch doesn't tick slower by providing a bit of extra force at the end of the running time when the spring is almost out of energy. The movement side is done, so let's start now with the dial side. This part of the watch is called the keyless works. Keyless, as in without a key, and that's because up until mid-1800s, pocket watches needed an actual key to be wound and to set the time as well. So you had to open the case, get the key directly on top of the barrel arbor, and turn it to wind the mainspring. I think Patek Philippe had the patent for the mechanism and was the first watch brand to sell watches with it. And we are done here. This is only the main plate where all the parts are assembled into. And these circles that you can see engraved on the movement is called perlage. This is one of the decoration techniques the manufacturers use to decorate these metal parts. The last thing to do before having a look at the case is to unscrew the crown from the stem. To do this, we use a spin vise, which allows us to grab the stem tightly while we unscrew the crown with the other hand. Good. Okay, now that we finished with the movement, we can have a closer look at the case. Well, the good news is that the case itself is not damaged. We just have to replace the straps and the crystal. I kind of like how it looks, so I don't think we will be polishing anything. Let's start by removing what's left of the straps. They're quite stuck. Let me change the tool. This case has a little hole in the locks where we can actually, there you go, feed the pin and push the spring. You probably noticed that the spring bar looks green. I think they call this verdigris. It's a corrosion layer. You can see this in copper usually, so I'm not sure if it's some kind of chemical reaction between the steel and the leather when you leave it outside for a long time. Let's push the crystal out. This is an acrylic glass, so they're quite flexible. But before we put all this in the cleaning machine, let's take some pegwood again and clean what we can. All these angles in the logs is usually where you see most of the dry dirt that needs a bit of hand cleaning. What you see is years of dirt here. Let's have a look at the case back now. Look how dirty this is. These little grooves are here to help open and close the back tightly, but the only thing they have been doing for the last 70 years is accumulate dirt. Now the last thing we have to do is to put all these parts inside these mesh baskets. This is what then we will put inside the cleaning machine. They have this small compartment so we can separate the bigger parts from the more delicate parts. And finally we squeeze the mainspring in. We will make the cleaning process separately, so the bigger parts will go inside the ultrasonic bath with some special watch cleaning solution to help a bit. Then when this is done, we just take the parts out and we rinse them in distilled water. The parts that we put before in the baskets go to the watch cleaning machine. This machine works with two different solvents, so the first jar has a watch cleaning solution in it, and the next two have rinsing solutions. Good, time to put everything back. These are synthetic oils. We will use this in the movement. The light blue is a very low viscosity one, so it goes in the fast moving parts. And then we have two more oils that are thicker, especially this one that comes in a huge syringe, and are made for slow moving parts with more torque where the oil is not supposed to move around. Now the first thing we have to do here is to install and lubricate the mainspring. And we actually do this with a grease, which is even thicker than the oils. The best way I found to do this is to apply a bit onto the fingers and then go slowly over the whole length of the spring like this. So that way we make sure we only apply a very thin layer. Now the more tricky part is coming. We have to coil the mainspring and fit it into the barrel. To do this, we have this vintage tool. This is called a mainspring winder, and what you see is a lot of pieces with different sizes. So depending on the size of the watch, the barrel has different dimensions and the mainspring has different length as well. So basically you have to use an arbor that is a bit smaller in diameter than the barrel you want to fit the mainspring into. Now we just need to find the one that works for us. Okay, this one seems to fit. It's fairly straightforward. We just have to fit the inner part of the spring into the arbor, which has a tiny pin that grabs the mainspring so it can coil. It's easier said than done though. Okay, now. And then it goes into the handle and we just turn it slowly. You can also do this manually without the tool, but you will see how tight we have to coil this, and if it's done by hand, there's a high risk of damaging or bending the spring. Let's take the arbor out carefully. Perfect. There it is. And then into the more satisfying part, we just have to push the mainspring into the barrel. Now we just have to put the barrel arbor inside. Sometimes arbors are quite big, so that spring wraps well around it, and it's not so easy to fit. Now, and then we put back the cap and close it. Now we start the assembly on the movement side. We place the barrel, the setting lever screw, there you go, and the barrel bridge. We just have to make sure that it's aligned properly. These teeth you can see on the mainspring barrel are the ones that will turn the center wheel and make the train of wheels spin. And that's exactly what we will assemble now, starting with the escape wheel, then the fourth wheel, third wheel, and center wheel. All these wheels have pivots on both sides, and these pivots are fitted inside the jewel holes. The jewels are the spin holes you can see in this train of wheels bridge that are actually, we just have to make sure that all of them are straight. So again, these jewels are synthetic rubies, and what they do is, one, they keep the wheels in place, and second, they reduce the amount of friction of the pivots since these wheels have to spin for years. Let me check once more. Good, this is what we want. You can see all the wheels are spinning freely, so there is nothing blocked. Time to put some oil. We start with the barrel. This is the upper side. And this is the lower side. And same for the jewels. We just have to make sure that we don't put too much oil or too little oil. We use the thicker oil here to finish this side of the keyless works. So these are the parts that spin when you wind up the watch. Just careful with the spring. And then the ratchet wheel, you see that it has a square hole in the middle. This goes right on top of the square portion of the barrel arbor, and it makes it spin and coil the mainspring. Whoop. Wrong direction. That's a tricky screw. You can see the 3 stripes on top of it. That means you actually have to screw it turning counterclockwise. We finished the keyless works on the movement side, and now we have to assemble the dial side. First step is to oil the sliding pinion and winding pinion. And this is exactly where the stem goes, right through these 2 parts. So this is how it works, right? The stem turns when you wind the watch, then the winding pinion makes the crown wheel move, and the ratchet wheel turns the barrel arbor, which coils the mainspring. Setting lever goes in, it goes on top of the setting lever screw. That's the screw that we put from the other side of the movement and goes all the way through. So we have to turn it and tighten it from this side. This is one of the tricky bits here. This is called the yoke, which is what moves the sliding pinion back and forth, and it's placed under a lot of tension by a very small spring that, again, will fly to the other side of the room if it slips. There we go. Let's hold it with this hand and... oh, good. That's a relief. We're almost done here. This is a relatively simple watch. It doesn't have any extra complications, no date or anything, so there's only a few parts left. This is the intermediate wheel, cannon pinion, and the minute wheel. Perfect. This is the part that holds everything in place. It's called the setting lever spring, and it acts like a little bridge covering the wheels and like a spring at the same time, with this thinner part at the far end to help the setting lever change positions. Let's quickly check that it works. Almost there. We just need to finish with the escapement. That would be the pallet bridge, but first the pallet fork. This also has two tiny pivots. Okay, and then we secure it with the bridge. We need to be very careful to not put too much pressure on the bridge, so we just push it gently into position. If the pivots are not perfectly inside the jewel holes, we can bend them or break them easily. Now you can see when we turn the crown, the train of wheels is not turning anymore because the pallet fork is stopping it. That tells us it's placed correctly, and we can check it by carefully moving it side to side, and it should snap back and forth like that. Perfect. Before putting the balance wheel on, we have to do two things. The first one is dipping it into this liquid. This is a solvent called B-dip, and it's specifically made to dissolve the oils on the balance springs. Just create a bit of agitation to make sure it cleans well. And the nice part of using this is that it evaporates within a couple of seconds, just with a bit of air, so you're sure that nothing remains wet inside the movement. Okay, now the moment of truth. Let's see if we bring the watch back to life and all the work paid off. We carefully place the balance. No, not like this. It wants to run, but... Oh, no. Just needed a little push. Now the last thing we have to do here is to take off the cap jewels on the balance and oil them as well under the microscope. These jewels are a bit different than the rest. They are assembled into what Tissot called a shock resist system, which then evolved to the Inca block system, and this is basically a shock protection mechanism. We have two jewels and the spring in each side of the balance, and what this does is adding support to the balance tab and prevents the pivots and jewels to break if you drop the watch. Tiny drop of oil and back in place. Let's put the hour wheel. And dial washer to help the hour wheel stay in place. Okay, so let's take this out of the box. Now we just have to place the dial and the hands back in before putting the watch into the case. I have these tweezers with a plastic tip to grab it without scratching or removing any paint. And we just have to make sure that the pins underneath the dial are inside the movement holes. Good, then the way to fix it in place is to tighten two tiny screws around the edge of the movement that screw into the dial pins. To place the hands, we have another tool. That's what no one tells you when you start watchmaking as a hobby. There is a lot of different tools. There's basically a tool for everything. So we take the hands with the same plastic tweezers, since the loom on these hands is quite fragile and we don't want to damage it. We just push the hour hand down with this pin, a bit more. And then the minute hand goes on top. You can see that the hour hand fits into the golden portion, which is the hour wheel underneath the dial, and the minute wheel fits into the silver part, which is the cannon pinion underneath that hour wheel. Last thing is a tiny seconds hand that goes in the middle of the sub-seconds dial, and that goes on top of the extended pivot from the fourth wheel, which spins one full round every 60 seconds, of course. And it ticks right away. Great, almost done here. Let's just check that it works correctly. Sometimes the hands bump into each other if they're not placed correctly, and that's enough to stop the watch. Now it's time to replace the crystal. This is the old broken one, and we're going to replace it with this new one. You can see how different they look. This is acrylic glass, so it can be bent, and to put it in place we use a press. We have these two adapters that match the size of the new crystal. There you go. Now we place the case inside the lower adapter, and we place the crystal in between. So when you turn this wheel, the press starts going down and the crystal gets compressed and bent at the same time. Then we just have to slide the case upwards. And finally release the pressure so the glass can expand inside the case. We put the movement back inside the case. We unscrew a bit the setting lever to release the stem, so not too much, otherwise it will completely detach and we will have to open everything again. And don't forget, we have to place the movement ring back. Hopefully it will be easier to put than it was to remove. Okay, seems in place. Look how different this looks. I'm really happy with this watch. And this is why we do this. When we started, we had a broken watch, it didn't run, no one could enjoy it. And now it looks like it's new and someone can wear it again. It's a fairly small watch by today's standards. It's only 31 millimeters. But I think this is part of the charm of these vintage watches, just how small they are. Last thing before closing, let's put a rubber gasket in to replace a petrified one we found. And close it. The only thing left is to put some straps. I have some nice handmade leather straps I bought for this watch. So let's see how that goes. They seem a bit too big, but we'll make them fit. And it did. Let's put the other one on and finish. Perfect. And there you go. Can't believe how good this turned out. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the restoration as much as I did, and see you on the next one.